rahmatullah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so alhamdulillah, this now is the handout says Theology of Intimacy, the first discourse on time. So this is a discourse. This is just a talk. This is not from a book. I got books in front of me, but it's really not from a specific book. What I did was I came with this idea probably in 2005. I took the word theology and I broke it down. It was an acronym, and where I wanted to talk about aspects of intimacy, or unsiyat. The idea of uns, like the word uns, Arabic, or intimacy, or in a sense of loving intimacy, is considered by some jurists or linguists to be the root of the word insan, the idea that of a human, of a person. While some say it's nasa, the idea of forgetfulness. So you have the idea that humans are forgetful, and yet they also have an intimate relationship with God. But they're forgetful of the one they should have an intimate relationship with. Sounds like any marriage. So the idea then of developing an intimacy is important. So theology then, I've taken these words and the word theology, and so today for the T for theology is about time. About time. And how to have time. So the first thing is I have a quote there from Ibn Ata'Allah, Al-Anfus Jawahir, which means breaths are precious jewels. Al-Anfus Jawahir. It's very beautiful. Your breath is a precious jewel. You only have so many jewels in the treasure chest of your life. You've only been given so many. And every day you are taking out a number of breaths. I've recommended this if you want to do something. I had this idea. Get a jar of jelly beans. I don't care, put jelly beans in it. You know, that are halal, jelly beans. And put 365 jelly beans in it, or if you want to do a lunar Muslim Islamic year, about 354, 55 beans, depends on whether you see the moon or not. You know, you're going to have a few extra beans there just in case you have to. And every day take out a bean. Or not a bean. Put in something else that you, the idea of going out and maybe you want to put in, if it's not a bean, then maybe a dry bean. Take the bean out, hit it with a hammer, pick up all those dry beans, go outside and blow it in the air. That was one day of your life. Where you actually tick away the days of your life. Because your days are like that. They are these moments right now, and that moment is gone. And interesting is all of our yesterdays now are like just memories for us. And they're not even complete. The class I just had is gone. There's a recording of it right there. But for each of us here, it's just a series now of broken memories. And that's what your life is like. And the future is a blank tape. You have no idea what's coming. So it's just this moment. So what I want to do then is just, this is a very serious point. How do you have to really take these breaths that you have, the anfus, and they are your jewels. They are precious for you. They are precious things. And you only have a limited amount. In the qadr, in the decree of God, you've only been given a limited amount of them. And the day you were born and you took that first breath, when you came out of your mother's womb, that was the moment they were being taken away from your account. They're being debited out until you get down to zero. So be mindful of them. It's such an important thing that in the spiritual traditions, in tasawwuf, there are disciplines of how you actually, for each breath, you can create a dhikr for it. For some Naqshbandis, for example, an inhalation and exhalation with La ilaha illallah. So each time you're breathing in, and you do this, so that every breath counts. Every breath counts. Allah Ta'ala says, وَقَالُوا, they will say, مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا, it is only our life of the world, الدُّنْيا. نَمُوتُ, we die, وَنَحْيَا, and we live, وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا, and nothing destroys us, إِلَّا دَهَرْ, except time, دَهَرْ. وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ, and they have no knowledge of that. إِنْ هُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ, they are only people who have conjecture. So I've translated there. They say it is only our life of this world. We die and live. Nothing destroys us except time, dahr. They have no knowledge of that. They only have conjecture, dhan. Well, so this is dhan. It's a conjecture of theirs. I also wanted to, and that's why I have the tafsir in front of me, from Surah Al-Hadid, which I thought I had written here on the text, but I may not have put it there, because yesterday I was thinking about this, but it came to me. And it's a verse I've cited before, but we'll get to there. So the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned in the hadith, the son of Adam wrongs me, he curses time, and I am dahr. In my hand is the affair, I change its night and day. That is, things are yuqallibu, the things are altered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the idea of dahr, though, is the idea of time in an epical kind of understanding. And people, it's really common for people especially for materialists, to understand, that we're just here in the now and this physical universe, and this is all it is. If you're a Richard Dawkins supporter or bedfellow, then hey, this is it. This is all you've got. You're just this bipedal hominid, mashallah, and you're here, to use your thumb to create magical things, and use your big brain on top of your neck here to get you through life, and that's it. So enjoy it while you got it, because when it's done, eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow you die. Right? That's what my mom has on her plaque in her kitchen. It's sort of a very unpleasant view of things. And then you see the large view of things. The large view of things, of time, is that it's pretty grim for the universe, as you know. The universe is winding down. So we're in this really wonderful stelliferous age, the age of the stars, and it's going towards the age where it'll go down to decay. So, on the large scale of things, it all is running down. So, our moments that we have, we must truly value them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the hadith here, he says, do not curse time, for indeed Allah is time, dahr. And that we understand that Allah is intimately engaged with His creation, and that moments, we call it a sa'a, or an an, or a heen, whatever you want to call it. Give it broader terms, a yawm, a day, or an usbu', a week, or a shahr, a month, or a sana, a year, or an asr, an epic. However you want to see it, we have this whole language of time and measure of time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us with this that we might then be mindful. So we don't want to curse this opportunity. We don't want to belittle this and say that it's not important. So he says, they live this world and they say that, we live and time destroys us. They're belittling time as something negative. But time is not there to destroy us. We are it, and within it. It is, and we'll get to that, maybe a little bit of discussion on time and all that. We have to. And we must value it. Just as you value your sense organs. Just as you value your sense organs. You value your eyes that are functioning now, and you value your ears and your hands and your tongue. You will also value the time reality of the spatial temporal reality which you are of and you are part of your matter, of which you are composed of, your physical body, and the time vector of it in the temporal, spatial, Einsteinian view of things. It's part of you also. It is part and parcel, just as your limbs are. And so just as you have to have excellence, for example, as we talked about a little bit ago, towards all things, you must have ihsan in time itself, with time itself. So the Prophet said, "النعمتان مغبون فيها كثير من الناس صحة وفراغ." The Prophet said, I didn't get the Arabic here, 2 blessings which most people lose of them are صحة, physical health, mental health, and farag, free time, when you have no work, there's no shughl for you. These are 2 things that most people lose out on. And of course, you've heard this hadith before. And siha, of course, your physical body, and when you're a young person, there's a lot of virtue as a young person. If you're a young person, to worship Allah is a great virtue. Yawm al-Qiyamah, and a young person, the shab who worships Allah, will be in the shade of the throne in Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's a virtue there, and we all want to have had that in our youth. If you're a young person, most of you are young people here, you're all technically shab right now. You're not 40 years old. I'm 47, so I'm no longer shab. I'm ikhtiyar, I'm getting old, right? So in my youth, if I did what good I did, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, I became Muslim, so I'm grateful for that, mashallah. And I stumbled a lot with that, but didn't give it up, a little bit there. But moved, came back. The point is, mashallah, there's a virtue there. And you young people are choosing, to make Allah your priority, inshallah. So there's a great promise for you. Just as long as your last nafas, your last breath is with Allah. That last jawhar, when you take out your last jewel, don't take out pyrite, fool's gold. Don't take out doubt, shak, fear, khawf, when your final breath leaves you. You want it to be the most precious breath, the one on iman. As you're exhaling your final breath, you're saying, La ilaha illallah. This is what you want. This is what you should strive for. So, Allah Ta'ala warns us in the Quran, Yunadunahum. It's called out to them. Called out to them. They call out to them. Who are these? Whom? Here are the munafiqun, the dissimulators, those who show 2 faces with God. Alam nakun ma'akum, on Yawm al-Qiyamah. They will say to the mu'minun, were we not with you? They will say that the believers will say, Bala, indeed, you most certainly were with us. No doubt about that. We were all on that, evening bus home, shoulder to shoulder. On the commuter train, shoulder to shoulder, bumping shoulders and bumping into each other. When you're you're at the mall, you're walking in the mall. You're bumping shoulders with people of hellfire and people of Jannah at the moment, right there. All right? وَلَكِنَّكُمْ فَتَنْتُمْ أَنفُسَكُمْ. But you tried your own souls. You tried your own. You were your own fitna. You yourself were your own fitna. You were your own forge where you burnt yourself. You thought everything else was a fitna? You were your own fitna. You followed yourself. وَتَبَرَسْتُمْ. And you did what? You waited. You tarried. You were people of Ahl Sawfa. Or Ahl Tasweef. Who are the people Ahl Tasweef? People say, I will do this. Sawfa yafa. I will do it. I will do this. I'm getting on it tomorrow. I've got it scheduled in for March 13th to be a good Muslim. I'm looking forward to the month of Rabi al-Awwal, when we do our gazillion milads. The gazillion milads going on everywhere, every hour. MashaAllah. It's like, I will be a good follower of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah. Inshallah, inshallah, inshallah. Ahl Tasweef, people of I will. People of will. And Allah warns us, that's tabarras. That's just delaying. Delaying it. Irtabattum. And they doubted. La rayba fi, alif lam mim, dhalika al-kitab, la rayba fi. That's that word there. Rayb. There's no doubt. You questioned it. You had doubt and suspicion. Perhaps it was because you argued your argument with God. You always argued your good argument with God why you didn't offer your prayer, for example. You always had a good reason. You always had a good reason to engage in the practices that you did. Everyone has their reasons. وَغَرَرْتُمْ أَمَانِي. And amani, false hope, deceived you. What the Prophet say, there are people who are the smart person is the person who remembers death and prepares for what comes after it. And the ajiz, the buffoon, the person who is mentally challenged, is the person who lets himself follow his caprice, and he says, and he has hope, and he has hope in Allah. This idea of amani here. That you follow your caprice. So what? You tried yourself. You had the fitna of yourself. You tried your own trial. And what did you do now with that? You then, from there, you followed your caprice. And you have this big hope in Allah. And it all wraps up. And all of those breaths that you were given, the anfus, were all dust in the wind. Who said that? Was that what's famous? It wasn't REO Speedwagon, Dust in the wind. That's all it is. Dust in the wind. It was all gone, scattered. It's all gone. So we have to be very serious about this. So, before I move on, in Surah Hadid, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Hadid, which the verse we just had, Allah says in verse 16, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ وَلَا يَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلُ فَطَالَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَمَدُ فَقَسَّتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَكَثِيرٌ مِّنْهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. Well, I was reading the tafsir of this verse, and I've quoted this beginning of this verse many times. Alam ya'ni. Because I talk about this verb, ana. And we get the word al-an in Arabic, now, the moment. It was very interesting. And I like this verse because it's a reminder. But what's interesting in the tafsir about this is that this verse was revealed right after the hijrah. Look at here. Allah is speaking to the believers. They've had 13 years. They've arrived to Yathrib, Medina. And this is one of the earliest verses revealed. Is it not time for those who believe that their hearts fear God? What was going on those first 13 years? Because the majority of people here are muhajirun when this verse is revealed. And yet Allah is speaking to these people about their 13 years in Mecca. And so this is what the Mufassirun mention here. And the hadith here, the Prophet ﷺ, when this verse was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ said, Inna Allah yastabti'ukum bi-khushu'a. Allah, and this is, I found this word he used in this hadith, istabta'a. Now, bata'a, if you know Arabic, bata'a means what? Duck. It means to be slow. And what it means here is, the Prophet is saying, Allah was very long and patient in waiting for you to have khushu'ah. It's interesting. The Prophet said, when this verse was revealed, Allah has been waiting for 13 years for you people to have khushu'ah. What does he mean by that? What's going on here? These are the muhajirun, man. These are the first Muslims. They didn't have khushu'ah. There's an interesting meaning there. But what's happening now in Medina? See, everything in Mecca was very easy. You had to have faith. Believe in God and stay steadfast in that belief despite what the Quraysh will say to you. But as soon as you arrive to Medina, the city, you get madan. You become civilized. And you are now in a situation where all the things that civilized and organized people must experience, you will now have to do. You will now, as Muslims, have to have your markets, where you will have to trade now freely. How will you be, for example? You will no longer be persecuted. So now when you come to God in free worship, for example, before you worship then, because it was a challenge to worship. It was easy to stick it in the face of the Quraysh and be bold with your Iman, your Islam. But now, there are no Quraysh to persecute you anymore. How will you be now? When the streets are free from thorns being tossed at night, no more thorns on the street. You can walk freely at night. How will you be in those streets at night? How will you be? This is what's being talked about here. And I find it very fascinating. And it's the idea of the moment. The moment. The an. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to us of time. And I have all these verses here. Allah ta'ala says, and this is of course a Madanite verse from Medina. الذين يذكروا الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. How do we measure time? How do you measure time? Look at the clock. The clock has a hand. The clock has a hand. Hands are moving. Well, that hand, the idea of the moving thing, takes us back to the idea that we measure time through movement. And if you want to understand that, and that's also when you discuss how the wave function breaks down on a quantum level and how that affects time, it's by movement of atoms. And the interaction of atoms, the collapse, for example, when there is no observer, there are probabilities of an atom. But when you interact with an atom in some way, and you collapse its wave function, at that moment, a time is in a sense created at that moment, in that quantum level. An occurrence occurs, and so then you can measure it, an event. So probabilities become an event. And that is simple discussion. The Quran talks to us about being with God in movement. Standing, bowing, sitting, lying down. So movement. So we are people who are engaged in movement. So movement and time are together in a relationship. And that's how it is in the real world out there. In the real physical world, time is associated with movement. So that's why the modern cosmologist says when the universe is so decayed and the universe is uniform at 0 Kelvin and there's no more movement on the subatomic level, time will then cease to exist. There will be no more time at that moment. It may be a trillion years hence. But in the death of the universe, this is what they talk about, theoretically. As long as there is some type of movement in some way, time will exist. When movement stops on the quantum level, then time will no longer exist. So this is, I think, if a Muslim thinks in this modern simple understanding of time in relationship to movement, our scholars have also understood, the classical scholar understood that we measure time through movements. And so that's why clocks have hands, because they are mimicking the movement of a shadow on a sundial. As it moves, the shadow moves through the sundial, we develop devices that have similar types of movements. We measure things that way, time that way. And so Allah Ta'ala says, Ash-shamsu wa qamar bihusban, the moon, the sun, and the moon in their measured courses. Right? I quoted here verse, another verse, but what I want to look at here is وهو الذي خلق الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر كل في فلك يسبحون. It is He who created the night and the day, the sun, the moon, each in its orbit floating. Everything goes through these movements. We use these celestial objects in order to measure movement. We use the decay of cesium for our atomic clocks to measure time. So decay is an act of movement on the atomic level. So movement is very important for time measurement. And so Allah has placed these objects in the sky. Allah Ta'ala says I have here the long verse there on the second page, هُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ ضِيَاءً وَالْقَمَرَ نُورًا وَقَدَّرَهُ منازل لتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب ما خلق الله ذلك إلا بالحق يفصل آياته لقوم يعلمون. And it is He who placed the sun as that which gives light, والقمر that which reflects light, وقدر and measured it manazil as the moon as manazil. The manazil are the stages of the moon. You watch the moon go through its stages, through the night. From the new moon to the full moon, back to the new moon. Each one is a manzil. Right? Each of these is a manzil. Each night is a different manzil. And those are measurements for you. And of course, the oldest type of timekeeping for people was the moon. Yeah. Earliest records of human timekeeping is based on watching the moon and then measuring it. Why? That you will know the number of the years. Wal hisab, and you will also know al hisab, Yawm al-Qiyamah. The day when time wraps up for you, in that sense. And Allah only created this in truth. This is there for you. It's real. Deal with it. Accept it. Work with it. Right? And Allah makes known His signs that you'll be a people who understand. You have knowledge. So we have been placed in time, physically placed and matrixed within our modern understanding of time and reality of time as it exists with space-time, as Einstein has elaborated, and then our contemporary cosmologies and physics confirm. And so we have looked at the signs of Allah and the creation of the heavens and the earth, and we confirm these things, and we can accept them as Muslims. I have any problem with that. But those things are there that we might be reminded of our anfus, of our breaths. It's a big sign for you, so take it seriously. And make your movements of measuring yourself, standing, sitting, lying down. Make these movements for God. So, from that then, Imam Kushairi in his Risala, which I translated a part of it here, and I have the Arabic right here. This is the Arabic, and this is what I translated of it. I thought it was good advice here. So he mentions in his Risala that I heard my teacher Abu Ali Daqiq rahmatullah alayh say, time walked is where you find yourself. If you are in the world, then your time is the time of the world. If you are in the place of judgment, the uqba, then the place of judgment is your time. If you are joyful, then joy is your time. If you are sad, then sadness is your time. He meant by that time is whatever predominates over you at any given moment. It's your hal, your state. What is your condition, your state? Every moment. That's your time. So how are you dealing with it? Remember, if there's ihsan, then every moment has to be a God-centered moment. The totality of your being of the moment. What you're wearing, what you're eating, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. All these are your hal of the moment. the an that you're in? And is it in khushu'ah? Is it in divine focus that brings reverence to God, honor to God, and you're reverently honoring God in that moment? And they said, however, some people say insight mean by time that which exists between two temporal realities. Interesting. And then he mentions here Sufi ibn Waqt. The Sufi is a child of the Waqt, the child of the moment. The true person of God, if I use that word Sufi as he's using it in this context. Because what did Imam Qushayri define a Sufi? He said what? A Sufi was an Ahl Sunnah person of taqwa. He's not a person of creedal. He has a very specific concept of Sufi here. He says Sufi is a term we use today, just as Sahaba were a term in their time, or the Tabi'een were a term in their time, or the Tabi'een was a term in his time, or the Zahid or the Abid was a term in the time of the great Imams. They were the names given to the most excellent of people of obedience to the Quran and the Sunnah of their time. Okay? So Imam Qushayri, he says the term Sufi is that. He's not a Mutazilite who's pious. He's not a Dhahri who's pious. He's not a Jaburite who's pious. He is a person of Ahl Sunnah who is pious. That's what he means by it. So he takes it as a specific meaning. He's defined this term in his writings. So the person of the Quran and the Sunnah is a child of the moment. And this language of abna is very important. As the Sayyidina Ali said, La takunu min abna ad-dunya. Do not be children of the world, like an abna al-akhirah, but children of the afterlife. Are you a child? Are you the produce? Are you the progeny of what? Are you the progeny of the dunya, which is fading away? Or are you the progeny of the afterlife, which is yet coming before you in the arrow of time? That which is on dabr, which has passed you by, and that which is mukba, which is facing you. Where are you? It has been said that being busy with what has passed only squanders the present moment. You can think about all the things you did wrong in your life right now with God. And you can sit down there and twiddle your thumbs. Or you can roll up your sleeves and you can make tawbah, because tawbah is the gateway to every good. Returning back to God, whether it's making an official tawbah for your transgressions, your missteps, whatever it is. Tawbah is the beginning of everything with God. So your first moment of time should be a moment of tawbah, reminding yourself to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So by now you should be understanding that you are being placed in this world. Time is a part and parcel of what you've been given, as much as every other part of you is of the ni'mas of Allah. Just as your hands, just as your feet, and everything about you which we ask on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. So you'll be asked about your time, your temporal reality also. How did you spend your time? So you need to then bring your lives together. Now today's discussion is not really deep in a sense, what I might call more metaphysical or warm and cozy discussion with God. This is more of a practical framework for you. You need to make your time of benefit. So on this last couple of pages, I think it's the last page, I've given you very briefly important times with God. I mean, I have Imam Nawawi's Adhkar in front of me right here. He goes on and on of hadith about what you can do at Fajr time, what you can do at the time of before Zawal, at the time of Zawal, and before Asr, and from Asr to Maghrib, and after Maghrib to Isha. Because we Muslims break down our time with our prayers. The Muslim's clock has those things on the face of his clock. The Muslim is the person who bases his or her life on the cycles of the sun that are flagged with ritual prayer. The cycles of the sun flagged with ritual prayer. That's the Muslim clock, right? So we need to then engage ourselves with our following the course of the sun. And so if you go to Imam Nawawi's Adhkar, it's like page after page after page of various ahadith or references to ayat of the Quran about time management. That sounds so very American, time management. So Imam Nawawi begins his discussion here. He says, "Babu hathu ala dhikr Allah ta'ala ba'da salat subh." The discussion on the remembrance of God after the morning ritual prayer. He says, "I'lam ana ashrafu awqati dhikr fi nahar dhikr ba'da salat subh." The most noble, beneficial, the best, sharafli, most honored time, the most noble of times of divine remembrance of the day is the remembrance after performing the morning ritual prayer. So, after you've offered your morning prayer, that is very important time for you. I know you want to brush your teeth and get your socks on and put your tie and fix your hijab and put your underarm and your deodorant on and make sure you're all looking good. But that is okay. But you really need to honor this time. Honor this time. So I give you something simple to do here. The Prophet said, "He who says La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la lahul mulk wal hamd yuhyi wa yu'is." There's a misspell there. Yuhyi wa yumit wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. 10 times. After completing the morning ritual prayer, will acquire 10 hasanat. 10 sayyat, the opposite of hasanat, which we already discussed today when we talked about ihsan, that is, sin will be effaced. That person will be raised 10 degrees, ashra darajat, and that day will be fortified from every disliked thing. You will have a fortification built up around you from makruhat, things that are unbecoming. He will be secure from shaitan. You will have the security, aman, from Satan. And he will be incapable that day in falling to shirk. And that day you'll be saved from shirk. Simple thing. Of course, you can plug this into a tape recorder and play it while you're shaving. That's not what we're talking about. It's like, Quran in the car, as or Quran as elevator music. Or you see there were Quran in bookstores and restaurants and Quran background. But to say this, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la lahul mulk wa lahul hamd yuhyi wa yumit wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, one time, and to say it 10 times at the morning after you pray Fajr, after you finish your prayer, not immediately, but you sit there and you do your normal tasbihat or dua, whatever you're doing. Sit there and think about what you're saying. Know the meaning of the words. La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah lahul mulk. So there is no God but Allah. Wahdu, one. La sharika lah. There is la sharika lahu. He has no equal. Lahul mulk. To him is sovereignty. Wal hamd. Him is all praise. Yuhyi. He lives. Wa yumit. And yuhyi. He causes life. Wa yumit. And he causes to die. Wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. He is qadr, decree and power of all things. And then you want Allah to what? Make your day. You want him to give you You want Allah to enliven your day, right? And you want Allah to slay anything that is going to interfere and impede that day, because on that day you are a barter of your soul. You are a tajir. You are a man who goes out to deal in his soul, and you're either going to have a loss or a gain in your soul that day. So how are you going to be? Well, this is a means for you to help yourself, to equip yourself. Of course, I can go through pages here of other things you want to say, but I put this one here because it's something most of the words either you know it already, but maybe you were doing it and you forgot to do it. But now I'm reminding you, sit down after Fajr, do your normal litanies, your Quran recitation before sunrise, to say this at least 10 times, and be mindful of what you say. Then, as the day progresses, we progress through our day. If you can, offer Ishraq prayer, 2 rakat after sunrise, about 30 minutes, 45 minutes after sunrise. If not, then wait till midday, mid-morning, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and pray 4 rak'ah minimally of Salat al-Duha, like you would pray any nafila prayer, 4 rakat. And if you can't, offer those rakat. One of the 8 gates of paradise is the gate for those people who offer the Salat al-Duha. It is a missed sunnah prayer. It's like the mirror of Asr. It's the mirror of Asr on this side of the day. Okay, so honor that. Just 4 rak'ah. You can take some time out and go off to the parking lot. Everyone's going to having a cigarette break. You have duha break. You know. So take that time out. Midday. This is the time of zawal. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ would offer 4 cycles of ritual prayer when the sun had passed its zenith before the dhuhr prayer was offered, saying, "It is a moment when the doors of heaven are open, so I love that a righteous deed ascends at that time to them." This can either be construed as the 4 rakat before sunnah, the dhuhr, if you pray early, or just 4 rakat of nafila prayer after the zawal time has come in, the zawal has occurred, and you can actually pray dhuhr at that time. I'm not talking, so you can either pray the 4 rakat of sunnah, if you pray immediately when after zawal enters and you pray your dhuhr, then those 4 rakat can act as these. Or you pray 4 rakat optional prayer. And also to make dua after you pray them. Because this is a special time. A lot of us don't know that. This is a hadith for that. That take out that time. Offer that prayer if you can. And it's also to remind you to offer the 4 rakat for dhuhr if you are not always mindful of that. After Asr to Maghrib, the Prophet ﷺ said that I sit with the people remembering Allah, the Exalted. From Asr prayer to the setting of the sun is more beloved to me than freeing 80 slaves of the sons of Ismail. So I know it's hard. You're at work perhaps. What can you do? Well, after you pray Asr, go back, but definitely before sunset. Okay? As sunset's coming in, take time out. So one thing to do just before sunset is go back to those 10 tasbihat you did for Fajr and repeat them there. Or to say Subhanallah bihamdi subhanallah 100 times at that time. Subhanallah bihamdi subhanallah. Take time out before sunset and to actually sit down. You can be at your desk, you can be at your car, but you take time out and you know the sun is setting. So what I'm implying by this is that you need to be mindful of the sun. Most Muslims are in the United States and Canada are not mindful of the sun or the moon. You need to get in tune with these things. You need to be aligning yourself with these signs of God. They are ayat of Allah, just as you align yourself with the Quran, which has ayat of Allah. These ayat of Allah are there for you to engage with. So be mindful of the sun. Look up in the sky, and when you see it's going down, take time out. Take on your fingers, if you have a misbah in your hand, a rosary, you get out and you go through these litanies to remember Allah mindfully. Now going back then, before I go on, I'm going to finish this here, and going back then to the verse that we read about people who, remember Allah qiyaman wa qu'udan wa ala junubihim. That's your everything. In the Naqshbandi Sufi tradition, this is one of the texts used for the idea of wukuf al-qalbi. Wukuf al-qalbi. One use is quoted by some scholars, the idea of monitoring the heart, or monitoring your time, wukuf al-zamani, is that you understand that standing, sitting, and reclining are your position. So each position you're in, that in any movement you're doing must be done with divine remembrance. Any movement you're doing, don't forget. Coming up the staircase, going down the staircase, getting in the car, going to the toilet, walking to the house. You can always be engaged in God and all of those things. So that's not always easy. You have to train yourself to do that. So if you can start a program where you start incorporating into your life litanies, daily things, and you maybe have a checklist that you make sure you're doing it until it becomes, you habituate to it, then you move on to number 2 in your checklist until you habituate yourself to practices. And waking up at night, when you wake up at night, if you wake up to offer the Qiyam al-Layl or Salat al-Tahajjud, to say this, La ilaha wahdu la sharika lahu mulk wa hamd yuhyi wa yumeet. I keep spelling that wrong. Yuhyi wa yumeet wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. I think it's because I cut and pasted it. Walhamdulillah wa subhanallah wa la ilaha illallah wa Allahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Allahumma ighfir li. It should be Allahumma yaghfir li, not la. Right? I typed the wrong key there. Allahumma ighfir li. To say this when you wake up at night. So there is no deity but Allah, one, no partner does He have. To Him is the sovereignty, to Him is all praise. The one who causes to live, the one who causes to die. He has authority and power over all things. Praise be to God, magnified is God. There is no God but God. God is greater than all other things. There's no power and strength except in Allah. Oh Allah, forgive me. Allahumma ighfir li. To try to say this when you wake up at night. And then Ibn Rajab, in another book of his, on Mawasim, on the seasons, he talks about seasons. And he mentions that, very briefly here, about springtime. In his whole discussion on springtime is a season for you to remember not to be deceived by the world. Because what's springtime about? It's about zinat hayati, it's about the beautiful things of the world. It's about fresh leaves and fresh flowers and everything's new. So spring is nice, but don't let the dunya deceive you in springtime. Don't let it deceive you. Summer. Summer is harsh. Summer is harsh. It's hot. Dry, humid. The days are long. The prayers are difficult. You have to spread all your prayers out. It's hard to pray Isha at nighttime in the summertime. Hard to get up for Fajr. So summer is a period of sabr and consistency. Spring is a period to reflect on. Don't be deceived, Naeem. Springtime is beautiful. It's nice to see those monarchs flying north again. It's good to see the flowers blooming and the fruits coming on the tree. But remember, fall is coming after spring. So let spring be a reminder for you not to be taken in by things. And then I quote here, the Prophet said, Ashita Rabi'a Mu'min. The Prophet said, winter is the season for the believer. Why is that? Because winter, short days and lots of long nights. The short days you can fast. It's easy to fast in the wintertime. Your prayers are done pretty quickly. You get them out of the way, right? And you have all those long nights to get up for tahajjud and to worship Allah. Because you don't lose the virtue no matter how long the nights are. So the Prophet said, Ashita Rabi'a Mu'min. Winter is the springtime or the refreshing period of the believer. So when summer was hard to catch your prayers and when the days were long and you struggled and you couldn't get up for tahajjud, you can make it up in the wintertime. You can refresh yourself in the wintertime. Any fast that was difficult in Ramadan due to illness or traveling, fasting in July, you can make it up in January. It's okay. So we need to be mindful of our time and of our days and of our moments and of our seasons. Because those are your anfus, those are your breaths, that's your treasury, and you only have so many in the treasury, and one day it will be empty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq in that. Any questions, anything you want to ask? If you would like me to create some kind of document for some type of supplications and things, some things you can go online and get a lot of stuff online about dua at different times of the day, after Fajr prayer and Dhuhr prayer, You can go online and find those things. So is there anything that anyone wants to comment on or ask as we wrap it up today, inshallah?
What about Awabin?
And then there are the Awabin. There's a lot of virtue of after Maghrib to waiting after Maghrib to Isha. Okay? So one thing is to offer these Awabin. Awab is to be humble before God. So the idea of offering extra rakat after you have offered your 2 rakat sunnah of Maghrib. It could be, 2, 4, 6, 8 rakat, 20 if you want, of just optional prayers. Remember, as you wait for the monasticism of Islam, is waiting between adhans for prayer. So we have a type of monasticism, Rahmaniyat in Islam, according to the Prophet ﷺ, that is waiting between prayers. So if you can take the time out, to arrange it when you can do that. Probably be easier during the summer or late spring because you're not at work anymore. You can sit after Maghrib and wait. Easy to take that time out. Basically, I'm reminding you, you have this is, organize yourself with a schedule of daily practices and mindfulness of God. Be mindful of God, of your moments, in your movements, because that's how your time is wrapped up in that. And may Allah give you all tawfiq, and give us all tawfiq in that. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha.